Namaste, Hare Krishna. Om Ajnanatimidandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Ena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namaha Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Welcome to all of you. I hope you are all doing well. I understand that this is a second session, so you're going to have another intense philosophical discussion session, and I hope you are prepared for that. So the topic I have thought of for discussion today is the theory of everything, the Vedanta perspective. What is this theory of everything? Did I make up this name or something like that? No, it's actually, there is something serious about it. About 2 years ago, if you had asked somebody, young person, what is the theory of everything? They would have said, it's a Hollywood movie. Yes, it was, in fact. It was a biographical film on the scientist Stephen Hawking, and who later on passed away. So Stephen Hawking popularized this word, this name, theory of everything. He's not the one who coined it. It was there. I've learned that it was there already. The theory of everything is a mathematical scientific framework which scientists have been working, if I remember right, maybe last 80 years. I remember as a college student attending a lecture in Bangalore city, and those days it was known as the Grand Unification Theory. Basically, it's like this. Scientists have figured out that there are 4 fundamental forces of nature. There is the gravitational force, the electromagnetic force, and 2 of them called the nuclear force. One is called a strong nuclear force, another is a weak nuclear force. Basically, these 4 forces have come into play and led to the world as we see it today. Whether it's the stars, the galaxies, and the black hole, or whether it's elements and all the things that we see in close proximity on our planet. And according to scientists, even the evolution of life has all happened because of these 4 forces. And now what scientists have been trying to do, is there a way that these 4 distinct forces can further be united to come to one, which has led to the 4 forces, which has led to the world and the universe? This is known as the Grand Unification Theory, and scientists have been working on this all over the world. And at some point, this theory, if it can explain everything, because that's one force or whatever that is, which led to these 4 forces, and these 4 forces has led to the entire cosmos that we see, including us, and we are talking about all of these things. It is something that should be able to explain everything. And that was the grand unification theory, and that became more popular by Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking was not only a brilliant scientist, he was also a great popularizer of science. And so that's how his biographical film came to be known as the theory of everything. Now, Stephen Hawking wrote a few books, and one of them is A Brief History of Time. This was a bestseller, and many times I have asked people, and they all say, yes, I have got a copy. In fact, I have got 3 copies of that book. At different times, people gave me the book. And so another thing I've noticed is that I talk to people, do you have a copy of the book? And they say, yes. Did you read the book? They say, not really. So I think this is the most sold book and the least read book. But anyway, Stephen Hawking wrote this book. It's a small book, quite thought-provoking. And the very, very last paragraph, last chapter in this book. And in the last chapter of the book, in the last paragraph of the last chapter of the book, and the last chapter is called the conclusion. And the last chapter is like this. So Stephen Hawking concludes by saying, if we do discover a complete theory, a theory of everything, it should be in time, be understandable in broad principle by everyone, not just a few scientists. So that's Stephen Hawking's point, that it should be something that it should be very simple and elegant and understandable by everyone, not just into some very complex mathematical things and only a few scientists can read and understand that. No, he expected that it is something understandable by everyone, not just few scientists. Continuing reading his quote, he says, then we shall all, philosophers, scientists, and just ordinary people, be able to take part in the discussion of the question of why it is that we and the universe exist. If we find the answer to that, it would be the ultimate triumph of human reason, for then we would know the mind of God. And this is how he concludes. I want you to pay attention to one or two points in this concluding paragraph, the portion that I've underlined. Why it is that we and the universe exist. It's actually a very, very significant and philosophical point about the question why we exist and why the universe exists. And very interestingly, Stephen Hawking has concluded this paragraph by saying, then we would know the mind of God. So, actually, why do we exist? Why does the universe exist? Why did God create us and the universe? What was in God's mind? Why did he create us? And why did he create the universe? Actually, these are the fundamental, very, very philosophical questions that Stephen Hawking is bringing up. And he is approaching that from science, from physics, theory of everything, grand unification theory, all of these things. In fact, when I was a college student in an early time, when I had not yet become a devotee, and I was a lot interested in these kind of topics in science. And then at some point I got introduced to Krishna consciousness, and then I started reading Prabhupada's books. And I found that these are, these are the central themes of the Vedanta philosophy of our country. So, Vedanta is also about why we exist, why the universe exists, and what was God's intent in creating this world and all of us and all the variegatedness that we see. So I continued to read Indian philosophy, Prabhupada's books, and then I was continuing to read science, books on science on this topic. Then I began to realize that the Vedanta philosophy is a lot more rigorous. I'll talk about that in the later part of this presentation. And at some point I joined the temple and became a devotee. So I found that this was a converging point. Now, I came across another very interesting thing. Srila Prabhupada wrote a letter to Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. This was in 1952, before ISKCON days, before Prabhupada went to America. And at that time, he was a lonely sannyasi living in Vrindavan. So he was writing his books. And in that letter, Prabhupada says, this is a part of the letter that I'm quoting here, the Socratic method of reasoning should not be confined to Athens. And he goes on, similarly, the Vedanta message should not be confined to Brahmins or Indians alone. It should benefit all of humanity all over the world. It's interesting to reflect on what Prabhupada is saying here. Now you see this Socratic method of reasoning. Socrates was the Greek philosopher many hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And at that time, Socrates developed this kind of a reasoning. And this is a kind of a reasoning used to stimulate critical and analytical thinking. And it is so powerful, basic, fundamental, and universal. In fact, the Socratic method of reasoning is something that modern world has used in every branch of knowledge. It is very, very common to use and bring critical thinking about science or even about modern day matters, medicine, politics, business. How you analyze, you ask some very basic questions to find out what's going wrong, what is happening. So use this in business, you use this in justice systems in the country. Practically everywhere, the Socratic method of questioning and reasoning to bring about critical thinking, analytical thinking about an issue. So this Socratic method should not be restrained, should not be confined only to Athens or Greece. It should go everywhere because it's so powerful, so basic, so fundamental and universal. So Prabhupada is giving that example and saying that in the Vedanta, there is a certain philosophical perspective. There is a certain way of looking at the world, at the universe, at oneself, at our lives. And that is so basic, so fundamental, so powerful, and it is universal. It cannot be confined only to a few religious people in India or a few Brahmins or a few Hindus. It is something that should benefit everyone. Imagine Socratic method of thinking and reasoning had remained only in Greece and had not gone to the rest of the world, and the world had not adopted it, used it, and we have the world as we have today, is because at the fundamental level there is a certain analytical questioning and thinking which was introduced by Socratic method of questions, and that's known as the Socratic method of thinking, reasoning. So Prabhupada saw in the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, in the philosophy of the Vedanta, such a very, very fundamental and a very powerful process. And he also wanted that to be shared with the whole world. And he was writing a letter to the Prime Minister of the country at that time, soliciting some help from the Prime Minister. And now, let's go to this subject. What is the Vedanta message? You would have all come across this in Prabhupada's books. The word Veda, it means to know or knowledge. It comes from the root word in Sanskrit, with actually, and with means to know, and the word Veda means knowledge. And so actually when Vyasadeva was compiling the Vedas, he was not thinking that I'm compiling a certain set of beliefs of the Hindus. He was compiling the knowledge that was prevalent and was being transmitted from generation to generation in an oral tradition. And that knowledge, at the dawn of Kali Yuga, he was compiling that into a written form, and that came to be known as Veda. Now what Vyasadeva did was, he was not only compiling the knowledge, and he was creating a hierarchical structure for knowledge, because every knowledge has basic knowledge, a more advanced knowledge, a most advanced, and the most advanced knowledge. Just like, say, for instance, you take mathematics. There is basic mathematics we all studied in school, and then high school mathematics. Then we studied a little more mathematics in college. And then if you do your master's and your PhD in mathematics, and it'll be very, very advanced mathematics. So in knowledge, there is a hierarchical structure. As we begin to comprehend and appreciate and able to understand more and more of it, you can go to higher and higher levels of learning. And that's very true with the philosophical knowledge, the Vedic knowledge. And so he created hierarchical stages of knowledge. And Vyasadeva wrote the most advanced part of the Vedic knowledge in the form of Vedanta. Anta means the end or the ultimate. And so Vedanta actually means the ultimate or the end of all knowledge. And that is about Vedanta. And it was that knowledge of Vedanta which Srila Prabhupada found that to be very fundamental, universal, powerful, basic, and this should benefit everyone in the world. And that was the driving force, and that was the instruction he had received from his spiritual master and his spiritual master, and so on. So this is the Vedanta knowledge, and which is considered even among the Vedic knowledge the ultimate or the end of all knowledge. Now, what is the Vedanta knowledge about? Prabhupada writes in one of the purports, Vedanta is the last word in Vedic wisdom. So you can imagine that there is a certain Vedic wisdom. It's put in the form of the Vedas, the Puranas, the Upanishads, and all of that. And the last word in that is the Vedanta. Very important. And in fact, that Vedanta knowledge was summarized by Krishna to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. That's why the Bhagavad Gita becomes extremely important, because in a very succinct manner, the Lord himself spoke that Vedanta, the last word of Vedic wisdom, in the form of the Bhagavad Gita. And later on we hear from Srila Prabhupada and from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's explanation. And the Vedanta that Vyasadeva wrote was in the form of sutras. We will talk about that a little while later also. That's how it is known as the Vedanta Sutras, or also known as Brahma Sutra. So Vedanta Sutras are in the form of sutras. Sutras are very, very short statements which are not always following grammatical rules. So it is agrammatical, it's very concise, it's very compressed, it is full of meaning, because those days, there were no hard disks and search engines and all of those kind of things. And so people had to memorize. They could easily commit to memory these sutras. And you can walk around anywhere and then pull out a sutra from your memory and then open it up, expand on it. So all of these things were possible. And that's how sutra is another kind of a composition in Sanskrit literature. You not only have prose, you not only have poetry, you have drama, you have plays. There is another kind of a literary structure in Sanskrit known as the sutras. And these are very, very concise, and it is compressed with meaning. It is meant for insiders. It's not necessarily outsiders may not understand. They require commentaries and explanations of that. So this is the Vedanta, the sutras, and Vyasadeva compiled Vedanta, the last word of Vedic wisdom, in the form of sutras. And later on, Vyasadeva was instructed by his spiritual master Narada that you have to expand on this Vedanta Sutra for better understanding and easy comprehension by the people of Kali Yuga, who are not going to be so philosophically very, very intelligent, very sharp. So, and that is how Vyasadeva wrote the Srimad-Bhagavatam. It's an explanation of the Vedanta Sutras. And the very early sutra is Janmadyasya Yataha. We will talk about that a little later also. Janmadyasya Yataha is if I were to translate that exactly, Janma Adi Asya Yataha. It simply means creation, etc., from which. You see how it is not at all, it's not a complete grammatical statement, sentence. That's how sutras are. And when Vyasadeva wanted to write an explanation of the Vedanta Sutra, he begins the very first verse of the Srimad-Bhagavatam using this sutra, Janmadyasya yathonvayaditirathas charteshva bhignasvarat thene brahma hridayadi kavaye muhyanti yat suraya tejovari mrudam, etc., etc., and so on. So this is how the Vedic wisdom, the last word of Vedic wisdom in the form of Vedanta Sutras, and an explanation of and summarization of the Vedanta knowledge in the Bhagavad Gita, and an explanation of the Vedanta Sutras in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And that's how we have all of these Vedic literature. This is the picture that we get from the Srila Prabhupada's and Vedic scholars' explanation. So now let's go back to the next slide. Okay. Vedanta philosophy is about absolute truth discerned from relative truth. I've brought in two important words here into discussion, and you will often, those of you who are reading Prabhupada's books, come across these words. Absolute truth with a capital A and a capital T, discerned from relative truth, a lowercase r and a lowercase t. So what is all this absolute truth and relative truth? We will look at this. In fact, there is one statement by Srila Prabhupada in the introduction of the Srimad-Bhagavatam about this, and Prabhupada brings up this topic and says, the conception of God and the conception of absolute truth are not on the same level. So there is a lot of difference between conception of God and the conception of absolute truth. And Prabhupada goes on to say further, the conception of God indicates the controller, whereas the conception of the absolute truth indicates the summum bonum, or the ultimate source of all energies. So one is a conception of God, indicates controller. And the other one is the conception of absolute truth, indicates a summum bonum, or the ultimate source of all energies. We look into all of these things in little greater detail. And now let's take a look at the nomenclature of absolute truth in Vedanta philosophy. This word absolute truth is obviously a very English word, and Prabhupada used this, capital A, capital T, absolute truth. Even Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had used that word. And what are the equivalents for us to get a sense of what this word means? Tattva or paratattva. Tattva means the truth. And Paratattva, Tattva means actually the ultimate truth or the absolute truth. Another word that is used in the Vedic literature is Vastu or Paravastu. Vastu. In the Srimad-Bhagavatam it says, Vedyam Vastavamatra Vastu Shivadam Tapatrayonunmulanam. Vastu means the substance. Even Western philosophers have used this word Vastu to mean substance. What is the substance of this world? Contrasted with shadow. So substance and shadow are two words used even in among Western philosophers. So Vastu or Paravastu and Tattva. Tattva vadanti tattva vidas tattvam tattva darshibihi tattva gnanaha. So Tattva is another word used for indicating absolute truth. Vastu or Paravastu. Another word is Satya or Param Satya. Satyam Param Dhimahi. Srimad-Bhagavatam also talks about. It is taught. So these words are used in Vedic literatures. And there's one more word. Brahman or Parabrahman. So these are all the words commonly used in the Vedic literature to indicate the absolute truth. Or when these words were being used in the Vedic literature to convey that in English language, Prabhupada used the word absolute truth. Now, let's look at the nomenclature of God in Vedanta philosophy. God, the common word is Ishvara. And as Prabhupada pointed out, Ishvara indicates a controller. Actually, the word Ishvara is controller. Meaning, like say for instance, I'm a controller of my body to some extent. I can control certain things of the body. Certain things, if a virus attacks, even I go crazy. I can't control everything. I can control some things about this body. So we are everyone, and I'm a controller in my family, and I'm a controller in my organization. I'm a controller in my country, in my state, in my country. So you can see that Ishvara indicates a controlling, and there is a hierarchy of controllers. Small to big, 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 and so on. So that's why the gradations of controllers, even in this world. And there are some very, very powerful controllers, and they are known as devatas. And they are also Ishvara, a controller. So we may talk about these controllers or devatas or even human beings or big personalities in this material world, in human society. But when we are talking about absolute truth, we are not talking about some controller of a certain sort, of a certain level, but we are talking about something, samam bonam, or the source of everything. We'll be coming to that a little more later. Let's hold on to this topic. What is absolute truth? Now, reading Srila Prabhupada's books, I have gleaned a few attributes of absolute truth that Srila Prabhupada talks about. By the very word absolute truth, a truth that is not dependent on any other truth. It is absolute truth. This is one understanding. Now, sometimes if you want to understand something, you should understand the opposite of it, then also you will understand. The opposite of absolute truth is obviously the relative truth, which means a truth that is dependent on another truth. So it may still look a little philosophical. I'll give you an example for this. Say, for instance, my existence is a truth. I exist. I'm a person. I think, I act, and I do different kinds of activities. And so I'm a truth. My existence is a truth. Now, however, my existence depends on the existence of my parents. If my parents did not exist, I would not have come about, isn't it? So my existence is a truth, but it is dependent on the existence of my parents. Hence, my existence is a relative truth. It is dependent on the existence of another two individuals, my parents, and they existed, and because of that, I have come into existence. If they did not exist, I would not have existed in this way. Right? And so my existence, as I see here in this form, in this body, is a relative truth. Now, the existence of my parents is also a relative truth, as their existence depends on the existence of my grandparents. Now you get a sense, truth, relative truth, if it is dependent on another truth. And now we are looking for, in Vedanta philosophy, an absolute truth which is not dependent on any other truth. Is there a truth that is not dependent on any other truth? Yes, it is. And from this we understand one attribute of absolute truth, the principle of absolute independence. And in Sanskrit, this is known as Swarat. Swarat means it is not dependent on anything else for its existence. It exists by itself and hence is an attribute of absolute truth. Now, there is a second test or a second attribute of absolute truth, and Prabhupada talks about this in the Krishna book, 2nd chapter. Absolute truth is true in all the 3 phases of time. Time is divided into 3 phases: past, present, and future. Something that exists in all 3 phases of truth is called absolute truth. If it does not exist in all 3 phases of time, it is called relative truth. I'll give an example. Let's take the beauty of a flower. Now, the beauty of a flower, you take a flower and it's very beautiful, fragrant, colorful, and all of that. But before some days ago, it was a bud enclosed with its calyx, and it was not beautiful, not as beautiful as a colorful flower would be. And you leave it for a few days, it will crumble, wither, and it will not be beautiful anymore. So, beauty of a flower, as we experience in this world, is a relative truth because it does not exist in all 3 phases of time. So, now we come to the second principle for absolute truth, for understanding absolute truth, called the principle of endurance. There is a verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about this. Na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha, ubhayorapi drishtonthas tvanayos tattvadarshibhihi. See, Krishna is using the word tattvadarshibhihi. People who have seen the absolute truth, people who know the truth, they are tattvadarshibhihi, they are seeing the truth. And they are talking about na sato, na asataha, sat and asat. If you remember, I had pointed out as the nomenclature for talking about sat, absolute truth and relative truth. Now, this verse I have slightly opened it up because of the sandhis. I have removed this sandhis and opened it up. Look at this now. Na asataha vidyate bhavaha, na abhavaha vidyate sataha. Ubhayorapi drishtontas tvanayos tattvadashi. Second line, I have not broken it up. Now you can see, na asataha, relative truth, vidyate bhavaha. Relative truth does not endure. And na abhavaha vidyate sahata. Absolute truth does not undergo changes. That's how the translation is. Those who are seers of the truth, tattvadarshibhihi, have concluded that of the relative truth, asat, there is no endurance. And of the absolute truth, there is no change. So, non-changing, it is fixed. It's not going to become something else tomorrow. In all 3 phases of time, it will remain the same. That is one of the qualities of absolute truth. Now, another interesting thing that happens is, I'm conscious of time, Vedanta philosophy recognizes the principle of causes and effects operating everywhere in the universe. This is something very interesting. We read about this in the Western philosophers, that only when a glimmer of intelligent thinking, human society, civilizations began to happen according to Western history is during the Greek times, and Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, they all introduced very systematic thinking, and the idea of cause and effect came about in that thinking is what we are told. But actually, even in the Vedic philosophy, the idea of causes and effects, and it is available in many, many references are there for this kind of thinking. In fact, as human beings, we also have a very, very natural and inherent understanding of causes and effects. Suppose you read in the newspapers, some years back we talked about it, we read about it, that there was Malaysian Airlines which was flying with about 250 people. And then it said that all of a sudden the Malaysian Airlines vanished, went out of the screen, right? We all read about it. And then we started wondering, what comes to our mind when we read that in the newspapers about Malaysian Airlines flight missing? Then we all start thinking, what happened? And then where did it go? And then we all will be looking for some news report. Did they find the black box of the aircraft? Because the black box is supposed to capture the data about the last moments, about what happened to the aircraft. So we are interested to know what happened and why the aircraft went missing. This is cause-effect analysis, you see. So we are looking at, we hear about some effect, an airline went missing, and we want to know its cause. So that's a human drive. In fact, this cause-effect analysis is not only among human beings, even in animals to some extent it is present. But this cause-effect analysis is a lot more developed, and it can be pursued more rigorously with human intellect. So in the Vedanta philosophy also, to look at this world as an effect which is brought about by a certain cause, and to analyze this world in terms of causes and effects is something that's very common. Now let's take one example. Cause-effect analysis. What is the cause of an earthen pot? So we are all familiar with an earthen pot. What is its cause? Someone came up and said, come on, I know. What is the cause of an earthen pot? It's the earth. Because it's the earth that was made into a pot. Someone else said, no. It was the potter's wheel. If you have earth and you don't have a potter's wheel, how will you get a pot? It'll just remain as earth. So you need a potter's wheel. And the potter's wheel is actually the cause of the pot. Then someone else came up and said, no, not the earth, not the potter's wheel. It was actually the potter. If there was no potter, if there is earth and there is a potter's wheel, and if there is no potter, where will you have a pot? So it's the potter who is actually the cause of an earthen pot. So this kind of analysis, and there are different kinds of causes. What is known as a material cause, an instrumental cause, an efficient cause. So the earth is the material cause. Potter's wheel is also a cause. It's an instrumental cause, and the potter himself is an efficient cause. So in other words, we are beginning to see that for any effect, like an earthen pot is an effect, there are multiple causes which makes it happen. I'll give another quick example for a good understanding of this. We look at a fast-moving car, right? And we want to analyze what is the cause of a moving car. Someone will say the petrol. Someone will say the engine, the gearbox, transmission, etc. And someone will say the driver. Yes, actually it's true. Petrol is the material cause. Engine, gearbox, transmission system, all of that is the instrumental cause. And the driver is the effective cause. Now, this discussion about multiple causes, effect and cause, and for a certain effect there are multiple causes, comes up in the Bhagavad Gita in the 18th chapter, where Krishna identifies 5 causes. And he says, Panchaitani Mahabaho Karanani Nibodame. Nibodha. Reflect on this, Arjuna. Consider this, deliberate on this. He's saying, Panchaetani. There are 5 karanani, 5 causes. Sankhye kritante proktani siddhaye sarva karmanam. Sarva karmanam siddhaye. For siddhaye means for perfection, for success, for completion of all activities. Sarva karmanam siddhaye. According to Sankhya philosophy, Kritante Proktani, it is said that there are 5 causes. And in the next verse, Krishna delineates what are the 5 causes. He says, Adhishthanam tatha karta karanam cha pruthak vidham vividhascha pruthak cheshta daivam chaivatra panchamam. In this way, there are 5 causes, Krishna says. And what are the 5 causes that Krishna is talking about? I've put that in the form of a simple block diagram. If you see an effect, Krishna is saying there are 5 causes. Number 1 cause is adhisthana, adhishthanam. Slightly messed up. Adhishthanam means the background, or the situation, or the circumstances. So that's the first cause. I'll explain this with an example very soon. The second one is karta. There is a doer. Adhishthanam tatha karta. Then cheshtaha. Karanam. There is, okay, the fourth one. Cheshtaha. There is an endeavor. And third one is karanam. Instruments of action. So, and there is a 5th one, which is daivam, or a divine intervention. Now, let's take one example. Success in business. You read Economic Times or modern day newspapers, they talk about some business which has become very successful. In the last 5 years, it became so big, and those kind of things. And they analyze, right? And when you analyze, sometimes they will say that this business became successful because the market conditions were just appropriate. The government policies were very, very suitable. And hence, like this, there was a situational cause which led to the success of the business. Actually, they are talking about adhishthanam causes. Sometimes we come across people saying that, our business became successful because we had good team. We are wonderful people. And that was the people who made my business successful. I've heard of one person saying that, a very, very successful businessman. He said, you take away everything from me and you leave my team with me and you give me 10 years time, I'll build my business to the same level of making it into a big billion-dollar business. I can do it because I depend on my team and I have very good people and they are the ones who make my business successful. So people talk about that one. So that means they are talking about karta. They are recognizing this as the cause of that effect, success in business. A third example, the third cause is sometimes people say, we worked very hard. We were very, very persevering and we were execution focused. And that's how our business became successful. They are identifying cheshta. Cheshta means endeavor. So they are giving importance to endeavor, and that endeavor led to the success of the business, they are saying. So that's the kind of thing. Sometimes people come up with this another explanation. They say that We used appropriate technology, we used appropriate strategies, and because of that, our business became successful. So they're actually referring to karanam, certain instrumental causes which led to the success of their business. So actually, when you do an empirical study, why a business has become successful, invariably people identify these kind of reasons. Or if you ask a successful businessman, they will say the government policies were good, market conditions were good, we were very hardworking, a good team I had, these kind of things. But actually there is a fifth cause, Krishna is saying, that is Daivam, God's blessing. Usually our societies may not all of them, some of them may not recognize. You may have the best of the market conditions, the greatest of the government policies, you may have the greatest of the people, you may be execution focused, hardworking, you may use technology, but sometimes it doesn't become a successful business at all. I remember in the 1980s, there was one devotee, one nice person, he used to come to our temple, in our Palace Orchards temple. So it was 1980s. That's when big successful IT companies in our city like Infosys, Wipro, all of them were founded and they became big, right? They have become very big. I remember those days, there used to be one devotee, he also returned from Middle East and he had certain amount of money and he was a very sharp guy. And I could see that he was very intelligent and he had a certain good amount of money. And then he also started a software business. Those days, getting into software was a big thing. And he also started a business. And I used to think, my God, he's so intelligent. And then he would come and analyze and tell us what he is doing and such thing, hearing all those things. Then and he floated a company and he started. And then I don't think you would have heard of SN Computers, right? It's no brand, no big company, nothing, right? So all of them began at the same time, but some becomes very extraordinarily successful. Some don't become so successful. It's not that they didn't have, the same market conditions were existing, the same government policies existed. They must have used a similar kind of capital and intelligent people, hard work, and all of those things could be there. But not necessarily if the fifth factor, Daivam, does not fire. If God's blessing is not there, you cannot succeed. So Krishna is bringing up these 5 factors of success. Now I have done another thing. Many times, last 10 years, 15 years, every year, when IIT results come or IAS results come in the newspaper, these media people go to them and ask the toppers, what is the cause of your success? And in fact, I have a gathering I've collected all such newspaper clippings over the last 10 years or 8 years or so. And I've analyzed. And then when media people go and ask them, these are the kind of answers they get. Sometimes the students say, my family was very encouraging. My mother used to get up at 2 o'clock and make a hot glass of coffee or tea for me. And in my family, I had one cousin who was already in IIT, another cousin who was already in IAS, and they were all very, very encouraging. So they're actually identifying the adhisthana, the situation which actually led to their cause. And they identify that. Sometimes these successful candidates say, no, I was very determined, I was my concentration, my determination. And they take they're identifying that their determination, they concentrate. Karta, they're identifying. And sometimes they come up with, I was very disciplined, I was very consistent, my consistency was an important thing, and hard work. And last 2 years, I never went to a movie theater. I never went out with my family to a restaurant. I was so hard. They're emphasizing the cheshta part of it, very hard work. And that led to my success. Sometimes they say that, no, I had the coaching classes and then the tests and the assignments my coaching class used to give me, and all the internet classes that I was having, sometimes I refer to those kind of things as the cause of their success. They are referring to karanam. But actually, you may have a mother giving coffee at 2 o'clock. You may be determined, you may be hardworking, you may have coaching class. Still, you won't make it if you don't have God's blessing, which is the 5th factor. Daivam, God's blessing. So, this is another interesting analysis in the Vedanta, which is there in the Bhagavad Gita too. Effect, and there is a cause, and there are multiple causes for that. And in fact, all empirical analysis or case studies, in business schools, they do case studies of this institution, this organization, this business, what led to their success, or sometimes they analyze what led to their failure. Invariably, they identify those 4 causes in its different manifestations. Whenever you study a cause, whenever you study an effect on the empirical, on the material platform, you identify one of these 4 causes or a combination of these causes. Maybe some cause is overwhelmingly powerful than the other, and you usually identify these 4 causes, and generally we miss out the 5th cause, the Daiva cause. So this brings us to the principle, what is known as the principle of multiple causes. So in other words, there is an effect and there is a cause, but not just one cause, there are multiple causes that results in some effect in this world. It could be business success, it could be rank or in an exam, or any other thing that we can talk about. So we can analyze the world in the form of cause effects, which is something that the Vedanta philosophy does. Now, we will do one more further analysis of the cause and effect, which is there in the Vedic literatures, in the Vedanta philosophy. Let's take one example. Suppose I'm feeling some cool breeze. Now, the cool breeze is an effect. Now, I can analyze what is the cause of the cool breeze, and I'll find the effect to be, there is a fan, and the fan is bringing this cool breeze that I'm experiencing. Now, if I analyze carefully, the fan itself is an effect, and it is caused by electricity. So, if the cool breeze is caused by the fan, and the fan itself is an effect, fan is caused by electricity, and electricity itself is an effect, and that is caused by a generator which is producing the electricity. Now I can say, so you may say that the generator is actually the cause of the electricity, but I'll say, yeah, it's cause of the electricity, but generator itself is an effect. It is caused by something else, probably waterfalls and hydroelectric plant or so on. And now we may say the waterfall is the cause of the generator. I will say, no, the waterfall itself is an effect. There is a cause for that. And we may say, that's the rain cloud, which is the cause of the waterfall. And now you can analyze what is the cause of the rainfall, and you can say the sun, and so on. So in other words, you can see in this world, any effect. So in our quest for cause of an effect, we come across an observed phenomena or an effect, but that phenomena has a cause, an identifiable cause. But that cause itself is an effect and is caused by another identifiable cause, and that's caused by another cause, its cause, and so on. So we come across another principle that's operating in this world called the principle of chain of causes. Now, let's look at this. When we juxtapose the principle of multiple causes and the principle of chain of causes, and you get a certain view of the universe. And this is an important principle in the Vedic philosophy. You come to understand that the world or the universe we live in is a complex web of causes and effects on the time dimension. So you can analyze the world around us in terms of effects produced by multiple causes, but these causes are themselves effects caused by another layer of causes, and that caused by another layer. In other words, the whole universe that we observe is a complex web of causes and effects on the time dimension. So this is something, very logically we can understand these things, and the Vedic literatures talk about it. And from this on, we will develop further idea tomorrow to build up the understanding about the absolute truth and how the absolute truth leads to further understanding from the Gita and the Srimad-Bhagavatam. So, in other words, you may be wondering, where is all this discussion going on? We are supposed to talk about Krishna, and is somewhere Krishna coming up at all? So you will see more of this one, and we will take a break for today, and tomorrow we will continue. I'll quickly summarize what we have discussed and then take further and come to the very, very wonderful understanding that comes about in this analysis. And I'll also show you how Srila Prabhupada does all these things in different parts of his books. Thank you very much. Namaste. Hare Krishna.